Hey, this is a challenge. So I think in the past I have done podcasts where I just kind of like go off, and I'm not sure how many people do or do not come with me. In the last two, I've really tried to like collect data and follow like a linear stream of thought. And there's been like one tab, but now we're starting to get into like really thinking about the ecosystem, and so like that's not so linear anymore. So like now we're going a little bit tabular, and I'm going to try to stay organized, but this is somewhere between like a very collected kind of linear presentation and trying to explain something like very kind of like complex and interwoven. Yeah, and so wish me luck. Let's hope it stays reasonable. So uh with that being said, and if anybody has any questions, really feel free to, or comments, feel free to jump in. So first of all, the curve unlockening. There we put a dashboard together here. You can click on it and go see it. It looks like this, right? And it just kind of shows all the stuff that I think would matter. And this is basically since the unlockening. So what's happened is the price of convex has gone up. BRV and CVX are like really holding peg well. Uh, People aren't like locking. There's still, so like there was 52 million locked before, and like with that last lock, actually we're up to like 50 million. So no, it looks like most of it's coming back into the locker. bveCVX, we had some deposits. Pyrex was also getting some deposits. Then I think yesterday, like right before the lock, we got like 400,000, the mother of all deposits. So like that was good. My goal is still like 5 million CVX by the end of July. So like hopefully like the other 50 million CVX, like a little of it will come here. It's a nice place. Come. Uh, yeah, I think that's basically it. The unlockening seems to be going well. The end of the world came before the unlockening is in the Great Flood Storm, which is very often the case. And yeah, bveCVX is going to be, it seems to be doing well. The other thing is we've gotten a lot of compliments on the UI, which I showed you last time, but I just want to take you through it again. So like it's done now. And I think in the mock-up that we had, like this wasn't so nice, right? So there wasn't a concept of dollars here, but like Jintao figured that out. So basically now, like for every Vodium round, right, like this is exactly how much was distributed, the results of our claiming and processing bribes. It's denominated both in native tokens, right, and in dollars, and in like the percent of total, right? At the very bottom, it shows you how many dollars in per 100 CVX and like what the yields are. And so like even if you don't trust our pricing, right? If you don't trust that we said that, hey, like 1.5 Badger was worth 18 bucks on February 9th, right? You're able to really go through and test everything, right? And then again, like Jintao, maybe we'll talk about it at some point, but my understanding is this yield is an average over the last 21 days, right? So that's like 1.5 rounds. So I think that would be somewhere an average of between, yeah, like this 32%, right? Most of it, right, because we're towards the end of a round, and then the 42% that came before it, right, and you end up with 36. So basically, yeah, that's like I think the most transparent one can possibly be about like how this sort of a thing works, right? How a managed convex thing that is seeking yields works. And I think everybody agrees, and I think we've done a nice job of like nicely baking it into the UI, so it's just everything you need in one place. And yeah, I'd love to see like our competitors like provide the same, yeah, the same level of detail, so that like hopefully in 16 weeks when we try to like talk about like how things perform, like we actually know. Uh, it's kind of that. Any questions about bveCVX? No. The other thing I'll say is that page, we needed to get it out very quickly because we wanted to get it done before the unlockening. But the goal is like that is kind of a generalized influence page. So the goal is to like Gravior will also have something like that in the next like month or two. Like once you figure out how to get that generalized and use it for like any of our influence faults. Okay. So then the Aura ecosystem vaults. So I know like a week ago I was talking about bveCVX, right? Which, if you're familiar with Badger vaults, we've got in the Curve ecosystem, we've got this bveCVX vault and this like little mini flywheel. And the idea was to port it over. So what happened is we started by saying like there's dollars, right? If you look at here, right, at Oraval, you'll see that it has yields in dollars, balancer, and Aura. And CVX CRV is the same, right? It's just convex curve and 3 curve. So if you what we did with curve, that moves. What we did with curve, right, is we sold all the dollars for more CVX CRV and used it to auto compound, which seemed cool. But like as a user of the vault and kind of just talking to the treasury, like also users of the vault, like the experience of being a hodler in that set, which is kind of I think what Badger wants to encourage people to do, is like invest and stay put and have a good investment decision, is that you went on like the great like convex 20x round trip, right? So you were buying low and you were buying high, and then you just ended low, and at the end like you had a little bit more convex, but it wasn't worth that much more, right? So like taking that into account and thinking about like right now that everybody probably needs more dollars, we decided that like maybe it makes a better sense to just keep the dollars as dollars, right? But in an auto compounding form. So if you go on Aura, you'll see that there's this Aave USD pool. It's projected to yield 13%. It's yielding 8 right now, right? It emits again like BAL and Aura, which can then become bAura, BAL, and Graviaura, right? So it fits right into the flywheel. And so basically, yeah, like now you're going to get dollars, and we're not going to sell the dollars for some risk on asset. And I think in general, like my feeling, and people seem to agree, is that it makes more sense to like leave that in an auto compounding. It's working there like that, and let people make like that individual decision about like when they want to adjust their risk profile. So that's what we are working on. That's why it's taking a little while. I think it's just final checks and making sure the yields are right and dealing with some like last details and making sure that we deliver it well. So I don't know, sometime in the next week, like that should be out, right? So that being Orabal, we've already got Graviaura, right? But then bAurabal and this bAave USD, right? And then again, like all three of these things will kind of flywheel and emit each other. And that basically completes the base flywheel. And then the other thing that is coming up, I hope soon, like it's just kind of trying to get some stuff figured out with the native boost, is this Badger Bitcoin vault, which I know people are waiting for. So like once we get this done, right, like just the very basic flywheel, we have our thing, then we're in a situation to build whatever vaults we want on top of it, right, that emit these tokens. And then Badger Bitcoin will be first. And then I guess the other one, well, we'll get into that later. So the other thing about Graviaura, just to remind you of Graviaura, right? We're emitting 2,000 Badger a week right now. And we're still kind of in guarded launch, right? Which caps the total at 5,000 or 500,000 tokens. There's 19,000 left. We're coming out of guarded launch and going up to 5,000 a week. So like the yields here will more than double until we get a bunch more deposits or Aura moons more, which is kind of the goal. But yeah, and then remember that that's 19K over 5 weeks. So it's like 3 weeks of 5K each, and then a week of 4K. And then Orabel will no longer receive direct Badger emissions, right? And it will earn either by being in a vault or a pool where it's voting for itself, which we can talk about a little more later. Or if you have it in your wallet, it'll hunt and claim bribes, which Badger will buy if nobody else will. Any questions about that? Am I going too fast? Last chance before we move into before we get into the deeper stuff. Okay, cool. Review done. So, hang on, let me just close the door. So the Graviaura pricing problem, right? Or the Orabel pricing problem in this pool. So if you think about, if you've paid much attention to Aura, right? Like what makes Aura or VEBAL fundamentally different from VE-Curve is that it's not actually Curve that you lock, it's this 80-20 BAL WETH token, right? That you lock in VE-Curve, which means that along with like getting you to lock their tokens, you're also locking liquidity. And actually that pool is where most of the primary trading is. So it's a pretty cool concept, right? They're getting their primary liquidity with their locking. The thing is, then you have this Orabel token, right, which is paired with something, right? So you've got to pair Orabel with something. And so what goes into Orabel is this 80-20 WETH. And then you have this stable swap pool here that has Orabel and this 80 BAL 20 WETH in it, but neither of them are traded anywhere else in the universe. So the problem that you have like on chain in this pool is that you have no idea what the price is, right? Like you can go to the trade and you can do this swap and you can say, well, I know that like right now we're off peg. One Orabel or 100 Orabel is worth like 95 BAL WETH. Because there's no other market for BAL WETH, you don't know how much it costs. And so like everything's all screwed up. Like cow swap hasn't been working, right? It's been very difficult to deal with Orabel because this thing isn't working very well because it doesn't know what the price is. And so like part of our governance, and we'll get into that later, but what we've done and launched and gotten engaged now on is this Graviora Orabel WETH pool, right? It'll vote for itself. So like over time, it will naturally have good yields, right? And this has Graviora, which also has no price right now, right? I mean, one could assume that it's the price of Aura unless there's more demand to withdraw it than there is available to withdraw. But like, again, at this point, nothing knows. And Orabel, right? But now we have this price for WETH. And so what you can do is say, okay, well, based on this 24,654, like I'm going to assume that this is also worth 24,654 and this is worth 24,654 because the pool is 33, 33, 33 by default, right? And then from that, you can extrapolate a price for Graviora and Orabel. And so what's interesting, the great community arb that happened last night is the yields turned on for this pool. Like there was nobody in it. So it was like 2,000% yields and it was like and then like we were looking to deposit. I was looking to deposit about like 4 ETH. So maybe like about a $15,000 deposit into the pool. And the question is, well, this is totally off balance, right? And so I know that if I calculate the proper balance of all of these tokens and figure out like what the proper amount of the tokens are for my 4 ETH, and there's a sheet, maybe like at the end, Freddie can go through it, or if you look, we can talk about it, right? Then I know the other two prices of these things, and then I can just deposit at that ratio, right? And I know that like I'm not getting wrecked. But then the bigger question is, well, this pool is off balance. So if I can deposit into the pool such that once my deposit is there, the pool moves closer to that ratio, right? Then basically I'm making a positive RBOP and I'm making money. So that's just kind of, I don't want to get too deep into that, but like as we start to think about ratios and think about like more complex AMMs and pricing and how it works, right? It's interesting to think about like this kind of an architecture. And then the interesting thing about this is, like you or I or Balancer, like it is a pain in the ass to figure out how much this is worth, right? Because you have to go like take a few numbers and divide and whatnot, right? And none of the UIs that are out there, like CowSwap or Matcha or whatnot, right? Like nothing is thinking about the action of withdrawing from this pool to get WETH or BAL, right? To then further trade. So like nothing is routing through it. But like MEVs, right? These people that are hunting for money, like as soon as there's like reasonable sized RBOPs, there's researchers that are like, wait, something's wrong here. And like, I just need to figure out how to get my bot to do this. And then it'll ARB. And then as soon as like there's one or two bots ARBing, then everybody's watching the meme pool and people start seeing money getting made, right? And the whole kind of way that DeFi works is that as there's enough value here so that every time this gets off balance, it's worth arbing it all against this pool, right? You can make a profit. Then pretty quickly, you're going to start to see MEVs do that, right? After that, pretty quickly, you then start to say, okay, then these prices start to stabilize. And you actually get to a point where you say, okay, like we're pretty sure, like maybe even the best or at least a very good proxy for the price of Orabel or Graviora is what this pool thinks it is. Yeah, I could go into that more. Does anybody have any comments or questions about that? Or maybe at the end, if there's something we want to get back into, we can do more of it.
Hey, Tritium, this is Freddie.
Hey.
Hey, it's probably worth pointing folks to that dashboard you put together that has the Orabel value. It's probably the easiest way for folks.
I'm going to do that in a minute.
All right.
I'm trying to say. But yeah, there's a dashboard that has all this. And again, like if you go look in the Gravior channel, I just didn't have time. I was going to try to get all those sheets together and just say like, or even Freddie, or if somebody that was there wants to just, like that's a very noisy conversation. But fundamentally, like we were kind of thinking about it. Here's the things that people tried, and like here, and just get a little bit there so that people can think about this better, right? Like the more we can enable people to think about this stuff, the better. But I'll take you through it more in a minute when we get into talking about ratios more.
Yeah, hey,
Um,
and Trent, just real quick on that, just so folks know, when they're looking at those numbers there in that pool, the 33, 33, 33 is the target percent, right? That's not what the actual percent in the pool is. So if you do the math on the values, right, they're going to come out to something different. So you can't just go in thinking that the pool's balanced when you're getting ready to do a transaction.
and again, Freddie, I think you've got a good sheet to do that. So maybe even now, if you just want to drop it in the office chat, like that sheet you made, and like with a sentence or two about how to use it to check the pricing, like that'd be cool. I was meaning to, but I didn't have time.
Yeah, I can do that.
Great. Okay, so oh look, it's the next thing, the Gravier yield model, the dashboard, right? So let me just go to it. Well, oh no, let's talk about balancer governance first, right? So like I like to tell stories. So the story of Aura, right? So Aura tried to launch, they tried to get this gauge, and it was voted down, right? And then everybody was kind of like, oh no, Aura, right? There was like a lot of FUD in the market, and I kind of like there was kind of this opportunity there to like help deal with it, right? So we kind of tried to make sure we got Gravior up and get it running. It had a mission so that there was like somewhere where somebody could like put their aura and make money, right? And it didn't just feel like a useless token with no utility. And then there was still this Orabel emissions event running, so Orabel still had very high yields, right? And then the other thing that we were starting to notice because the LP was up was this problem, right? That there was Orabel that it was like off peg, and you still see everybody depositing in the pool, right? Which means that nobody can really figure out that they can buy it for way less than they're depositing it, and they're depositing it. At the time, or it was bootstrapping, it's good for Aura. Like it's not that that's the most horrible thing in the world, but it does demonstrate that like the market isn't working. So we proposed Gravior was meant to solve these kinds of problems, right? And we came up with this governance that proposed three pools, right? One was like Aura, ETH, Graviora. And the idea there was just because this vote had gotten voted down to get some liquidity for Aura, right? And then the second one was this Aurabel ETH Graviora, right? And that I kind of just explained to you, right? The idea behind that was to create a market for Orabel that everything knew how to trade out of, right? That could be arbed against the stable swap. And also to get, the other thing is Gravior holders want liquidity, right? So as soon as we get anything up, then you start to be able to trade Gravior. And the more of these there are, obviously, the more liquid Gravior becomes. And then the third thing we want to do is just kind of switch our Badger WBTC to a Badger Graviora. Yeah. So that was kind of what we asked to do. And we explained all of the things that I've explained. You guys can read this governance if you want, right? And then there was this big conversation, right? So the whale who voted against the pool directly kind of came in and said why he voted against the pool. And there was a conversation about that. There was a bit of a conversation about that, right? And then Solar Curve came around and he said, like, I don't know about this 80-20 pool, right? There's this cream pool and there's this badger pool, and it just seems like all of the emissions are going to like low cap like 80-20 pools. And so then we had a little bit of a conversation and it got contentious, and Poe was kind of trying to talk about how we were trying to capture value, and people were starting to say, this seems a little bit like extractive and we're not sure. So we went around, and then I said, you know what, never mind. Like this was supposed to be about ecosystem pools. So let's not talk about the badger pool now. Like we can come and talk about a badger pool later, but like what we're actually trying to do is like we're investing in Aura, we're in this ecosystem, right? And we want to make sure this thing works, so that like so that we can use it, so that users can use it. And like what's the point of being in an ecosystem that doesn't work? This guy came and had some ideas about the pool. Anyway, we kept going. And then Solar Curve came and said, actually, after thinking about it, I don't like Gravior, right? I have to vote against any gauge with Gravior. And fundamentally, that's because he's worried, like what has happened since they launched bveCVX is that there's been holders that are like voting a lot for small cap pools and like extracting a lot of value from the system. And I don't think that like Solar Curve, he's a smart guy, right? And I don't think that he had actually like done all of the modeling that I'm about to show you. But there was just this sense that, man, like this thing's like really powerful or could be, right? And if it just ends up like sucking all the yields to the Badger pool or whatever, right? Then I've got like, like more and more this problem's getting worse. And I've got this idea, Solar Curve has this another idea for how to deal with the problem, which is this core pool value. So anyway, that was kind of a thing. And then like there was lots of back and forth between the team. And like you can read, like there was a whole lot of conversation here. A lot of it. And we kind of got to the point where it was like, you know what, like I want to see this core pools thing. Like basically we got to the point where it's like we're not ready, or I'm not ready to support this yet. Like I want to see what happens with the core pools thing. So let's quickly talk about the core pools thing. This is Solar Curve's idea, which I think is very good. And so Solar Curve's idea is basically there's Balancer has like this vault. This is the best example. I think the rest of them are still being worked on. But this is staked ETH that is then actually staked on Lido, I think, or something, right? It's earning extra rewards. And then those extra rewards are sold for more WST ETH, or half of them, right? And paid into the pool as fees, like as trading fees. And the other half, I think, I'm not like don't quote me on these numbers, but in concept, right? The other half goes currently to bveCVX holders, right? So that's where, the USD that you're getting from Orabal comes from a portion of the trading fees on all of these, right? Plus half ish, I think, of the income that's coming from staking this ETH while it's in the pool and not in use. So yeah, Solar's idea was like, what, like people with bveCVX, right? They should need to like vote with it to capture the value. The problem is that everybody's getting all the dollars and fees, but then they don't have to vote on the fees, right? And that's not aligned enough. So his idea was we're going to take all the fees that come from this staking, and instead of keeping them for the DAO or sending them to bveCVX, we're going to use them to bribe on the same pool in dollars. So now, which is cool, right? What that means is that like, I don't know when this is going to happen, but it won last week, right? Is it pretty soon? I think what you're going to start seeing is a bunch of the fees for all of these sets, instead of it being dollars going to bveCVX, will be dollars bribed on hidden hands for these pools, which means that if a bveCVX holder like wants to extract like the full bveCVX fee, right, they also have to use their vote weight to support the things that are actually paying the fees. So yeah, like cool idea, right? And if and I'm excited to see it happen. And the thing is, the complicated thing is that this is this custom fangled pool, right? Like somebody coded it and launched it specifically, and it was like a curated thing. I think all of these are, and so there's this Factory 2.0 that Balancer's working on, which basically, hey, Ice, do you mind muting? There's this Factory 2.0 that Balancer's working on, which basically will allow you to like launch any vault with WST ETH, right? So now we could launch like a WST ETH Badger vault or a WST ETH Cream vault or whatever, right? And all that WST ETH in that pool is staked and earning, and Balancer's making more money off it, right? And then you start to see how like maybe then actually some of these, even like some of these lower value gauges, right, do, if there's like a reasonable amount of like these interest bearing tokens in there, is good for Balancers. So like it's real interesting. The thing is like this VE thing is happening now. The factory won't be ready for a month or two, right? And then like when we get into thinking about the curve wars a little bit more, if you think about like the launch of a convex and what that is, it's about a year, right, when the emissions are high and when everything like has to like settle into place, right? And then by then the emissions are down, it's harder for people to farm it, and you end up kind of where convex is at right now, or like Frax and them are like, and it's like it's already having to like become the next thing. So the reality is that like the way I see it, this is a phase at least of the evolution of an ecosystem, or if you want to call it a world, we can call it that, right? Which is 6 to 12 months. And yeah, like I don't want to wait 2 months to like start trying our stuff. So that's kind of where we ended. And then on the weekend, we started thinking about regulation. We'll get into it. But anyway, the moral of the story is that, like, in the end of it, Solar Curve changed his mind. And then we were able to get enough votes to get this gauge through. And so, again, this was a very smart person. And I, like, talking about what it means to build a sustainable VE. There was a lot of contention. And then through the process of conversation, like, we came to enough of an agreement to think that we should do that. And so kind of that is something that I think is interesting to think about, right? And it has to do with regulation. But before we talk about regulation, I want to show you this yield model so that we can think about how it works and why it needs to be regulated, and then think about the curve bubble, right? And then we'll come back to regulation. Everybody still with me? Questions? Okay. Graviora yield model. So this started off as a spreadsheet, which is here. And this link here is public for everyone. You can use it. Just to point out, like on any of these Grafana dashboards, right, you can change the time frame and see all these graphs over a period of time. Because this is new stuff, it doesn't go far back. But, you know, like if you want to look at the last hour, you can look at the last hour. If you want to look at the last 2 days, you can look at the last 2 days. So yeah, that's basically how it is. So the way that this is structured is, you know, and I guess I can open this sheet. No, did that not go to the sheet? Okay, I'll change it to a link to the sheet. Yeah, I'll do that later. But there's a sheet, and there's a bunch of inputs on the sheet. And this top row is all the things that you put in the sheet. So if you look at the sheet, there's like all of the, you know, like Aura price, ETH price, BAL price, VE, BAL price, the supplies of things, the Aura per ETH earn, the value capture. I don't think that in the market cap, right? And so these are all the things you need to calculate all these things. And the sheet basically has like a set of orange columns where you can go put those in. Again, like Freddie, if you find it, you could dump it in, or if somebody can dump it in, cool. But yeah, so that's that, right? And so then basically what we're doing here, I will go find the sheet in a minute because we're going to talk about simulation. But then from that, you can like derive a bunch of stuff. So like, again, this is all assuming this state, right? But assuming these prices, like we can know, for example, that remember, if one aura, like let's just go through a few examples, right? If one aura worth 221, right, is minted for every BAL, and there's 3.89 BAL per or aura per BAL minted, right? Then each BAL minted is worth 3.89 times this aura, which is 178 or 70% more than 5.08. Right, the annual ROI per 1% in the Graviora pool. That one, maybe we'll get to that in a minute, or maybe I should go to the sheet. I should go to the sheet. But yeah, let's just talk about what these mean for a minute, right? So what this means is that if you had a pool with 99% something else, or and a mix of other things, and 1% Graviora, and there were no like changes, and so nobody deposited or withdrew, and the prices stayed the same, like for a vote, right? And then that was still there, you would get 4.41%, right? Some other interesting stats here. So like one vote, so one aura, one VL aura, if you vote like every time, right, will direct over the course of a year $11.07 in BAL and aura, right? And one VE BAL directs 6.9. And then the interesting thing is, if you look at this, the market caps, right? So there's more VE BAL than Aura, right? But Aura votes with like almost twice, or is worth almost, right? It's voting with, it's worth twice as much. So it's one Aura is voting with almost twice the strength of one VE BAL, right? But actually, like, like by supply, am I losing myself? Yeah, let me come back to that. But you see the point. This is clearly, you can pay 580 or 508 to generate 690 over a year, or you can pay 221 to generate 1170 over a year. And so because of this imbalance, right, because of this RBOP in a sense, which is very hard to realize, right, because you don't get these emissions. These emissions are emissions that go to a pool that then somebody can farm. And so like there's this huge RBOP in the ecosystem, right? This is also how it was with convex for a really long time, but nobody can really access it, right? Because yeah, like you can't do it. So then how would you be able to access all of this, right? And the answer was like a black hole. So the BAL black hole is voting on VEVAL, right? If 100% of BAL voted on VEVAL, which it could, then all of the BAL emissions would be directed to VEVAL, right? And that would yield 5.43% or 54.3%, but then nothing else in the ecosystem would have yields, and there would be no Aura yields because Aura is only like minted when BAL is farmed on Aura, and if it were all VEVAL, right? So the BAL black hole is just everybody votes for BAL. VEVAL gets 54.3%, and there's no other emissions in the ecosystem, right? The Aura black hole is then assuming somehow that like you could earn Aura on that, right? And it's not really, it's a conceptual thing. And so then there's the Graviora black hole rate, right? So this is something that could almost exist, right? This would be if you had a pool that was 100% Graviora, you could say 99% Graviora, and it'd be one less than this, right? And 1% something else that was voting for itself, that was farming on Aura, that was collecting all the BAL, that was collecting all the Aura, that was taking advantage of this vote premium, right? Then that pool would be yielding currently right now 441%. And then again, if you did that, you would be getting all of the BAL emitted, all of the Aura emitted, and nobody else would get anything. But if you could achieve that, which you would get 441%. Like obviously that wouldn't be good, right? Because then the thing has no value to anybody but you, and like, yeah, it's just gonna tank. But you could. So then we kind of look at, like these are just some graphs, but the point is from this number, 441, right, you can just divide, well, here's 1, 2, 10, 20. So you can see based on these inputs, right, these prices, market cap, how much things are locked, right? Like you can know that if there's 20% of Graviora in a pool voting for itself, and again, we have to actually like have it happen to validate all of this, right? Like this is still all modeling, and particularly like there's fees, like Aura's taking fees and like Badger's taking some fees. So there's like a lot of fees that slip in there, and I need to see it before, I'm sure. So don't like come at me and say, hey, you're off by a little bit. But based on all this math, which a lot of people have looked at, and which I'll show you the sheet and fix this so that you can also go look at, right? Like I think this is a pretty good estimation for like what a Graviora pool is going to yield right now. And so then like, and by the way, this was like higher yesterday, I think. So then like the point that everybody comes to is like, wow, that's just too much, right? Like that's ridiculous. Everybody's like, yeah, like 441% in a bear market, like what the fuck, right? And the point is that's because there's an RBOP, right? Once this RBOP is closed, right, which I haven't quite exactly figured out how it closes, but it closes by having primarily like a lot of, I guess, the Aura price go up and a lot more Aura lock, right? But as this RBOP starts to close, then suddenly, right, like Aura isn't as powerful anymore as a voting, right? You're not getting this huge extra vote incentive with Aura, right? And like everything's gonna drop fast. And so I don't know, like I what I haven't been able to do. Let me find the sheet. I gotta find the sheet now. What I have, if anybody like wants to try this, it would be awesome, right? Like I've gotten to the end of my. So anyway, here's this sheet, right? Like all those numbers that up top are here. This is from a few days ago, right? But like there should be some way to like scenario plan around this. So like what happens if somebody buys and locks 700,000 Aura or 500,000 Aura, right? So like you would have to look at the depth of the pool. You would have to figure out how much that purchase would push the price up, right? That would change the price. You would say like, let's just try it. So like here, right here are these numbers that we're looking at in the green, right? And let's say these prices are the same, but let's just for the sake of it saying, okay, like the price of Aura doubles or goes to $3. Okay. And let's say that another million Aura get locked. I'm just making this up, right? That was not what I wanted to do. So now you see here, this is again before fees. So like, but now you see that my black hole rate is like halved, right? Like I was talking about like, and again, this is actually, so then there's times 0.1 minus 0.16, right? Aura takes a 16% fee in there. And Badger takes a 10, and Graviora basically takes a 10% fee in there. No. I'm not thinking about this right. I can do this later. But anyway, yeah, you'll see that basically that cuts the yields in half, right? So as you know, as what this will do, and this is why I'm still buying Aura. What this will do is, you know, basically the yields in these Graviora pools are going to be huge. And in any of these pools, the thing that's in the least supply is Aura, right? There's tons of Aura Bell out there. There's tons of ETH out there. What there's very little of on the market is Aura, right? So in order to access these very large yields, what's going to need to happen is people are going to need to buy and lock Aura, right? Which then, yeah, you guys can think about it, right? So in a sense, like, and we'll see how much people respond to it. But if there's a good response, one of the things that Graviora has the power to do is close these kinds of RBOPs like with the whole ecosystem, right? It kind of does it at an ecosystem level, which is like the super cool thing about it. But also the thing that, you know, like I understand why people find a little bit scary and you're like, hey, we want to think about it now, right? Like this is very bad, right? Like if you ended up with even approximating like this black hole where basically like everything's just like paying itself and then we're, you know, like feeding into itself and then we're basically taking 10% of the fees and like from that deciding the only emissions that actually exist on Aura, right? Like that's not cool. And like again, if you read a lot of the concerns that the balancer team has now, it's that, you know, like their largest holder has like half of Cream and is voting on that pool. So like 25% of their emissions are just voting on Cream, and he's able to maintain, I don't even know, but my guess is like 70, 80, 90% pool capture, right? And so if he's got the pool, if you own 100% of the pool and you can vote for it, right, that's also a black hole, right? So in a sense, I think like I need to, but I'm pretty sure if you had a pool that you had 100% of and could vote for the yields on it and stake it on Aura, right? That wouldn't even be the Graviora black hole. That would be like the full Aura black hole, which would be like 530 plus 54% yield. So like they've kind of already got that going on. And then we're kind of coming up like talking about like, hey, right? And there was some concerns. Um, any questions about that? And then again, the sheet, the dashboard's linked in the sheet. And I will make sure that the sheet is linked in the dashboard. And then all the inputs are here. And if anybody figures out how to do like simulations based on like market events that we expect to happen, like or hope will happen, like people buying and locking and depositing Graviora, right, in order to increase the size of that set, right? Even just with like this one pool, yeah, I don't have the time in my math. It's well, or yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to do it. But I'll just test and we'll see what the ecosystem does. But if somebody wants to, it would be awesome. Questions? Okay. The curve bubble. So here, I've got the Vodium performance by round for curves. So I hope everybody here kind of knows a curve is. You bribe, blah, 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 right? Like people were bribing, their ecosystem was doing really well. And then suddenly everything dropped off quite a bit, right? And you can kind of see what happens here, and we'll get into it. But basically on the round 17, which is on the 5th here, yeah, here, right? Like, cool, good bribes. Like Frax is bribing like 5 milli, Terra's bribing 5 milli, right? Then we had like Mr. Quan and Terra, right? So Terra collapsed. Do Quan was yet deploying more capital steady lads. And then the next voting round, right? Like there was no more Terra. And there's half as much Frax, right? Because I think mostly because it created a huge FUD storm around Frax. So this is like the curve bubble. Like fundamentally, when I think about the curve wars, like, and we've been doing this since like the very beginning, right? Like we were on curve, we were farming Bitcoin. There were some devs that had most of the VE curve, and they were kind of trying to vote on what they thought were like healthy yields in the ecosystem. So it was like mostly three curve and like REN, and like there was like a very like there was a focus on like sustainability and building a sustainable ecosystem, right? But like DAOs couldn't use it, and then like Yearn kind of had this monopoly, and people didn't like that, and so Curve decided, or Curve Convex, right? This Convex thing came out, and what happened is like that went from like you very 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 quickly went from like like a not even a market, right? Like basically like a technocratic group of people kind of trying to decide what was best for the ecosystem to like a totally unregulated thing that didn't even have a market, right? Like suddenly there was like these votes, they were worth something, like everybody kind of had them. Like I remember in the very early days of the Convex Discord, there were all these people sitting around like with their $3 Convex, kind of like I think laurel holders are now, going like, man, like when DAOs realize they're going to buy this and the price is going to go up, and they're going to buy this and the price is going to go up, right? And like it took too long for DAOs to realize, and so somebody built Podium, right? And they were like, well, if they don't want to buy the Convex, then maybe they'll pay us for the votes. Um, and so that created a market. Basically, the story of it is like if you look at how much like this dollar per, never mind, I don't have the right number, but if you look at like the arb rate, so like how much is emitted per $1 in bribe that you pay, right? Like at first that was pretty wide in Convex, right? It was like, I don't know, 4 or 5. I think in Aura it's even more right now. But over time, as the bribe market started working, right, it's almost 1-1 now. So like what you pay in bribes as a DAO, like a lot more doesn't come out of Convex and Curve anymore. So like again, you went from this technocratic kind of like ecosystem focused thing to like the most like efficient and free market that could exist for votes. And what that meant is that like somebody like Doe here is like, hey, I'm going to just rock up. I'm not sure when it was, right? But like I got a bunch of cash and I've got like some like Ponzi that I want to support. And I'm going to rock up and start dropping like 5 milli a week, right? Yields are going to be huge. Everybody's like, oh, stablecoin, huge yields, right? And they're minting more and they're minting more and they're aping in to get these yields and everything. But the problem is the moment I can't pay this bribe anymore, like maybe I'm saving some Convex, but like 1 or 2 rounds, I fail to pay this bribe, right? The yields suck. Everybody wants out. And then like, yeah, like the Ponzi's up, right? And so the question that I have been thinking about is like, this is all good, right? But it needs some sort of regulation. Like you need to find somewhere in between. Like it's good that there's a free market, right? But you also need like the ecosystem focus, and like particularly in crypto, and like maybe even more so around stable coins, right? But like there just isn't, like you're not going to get a bunch of like individual kind of like free market actors that like come together to like do the altruistic thing, and partially it's because like they don't even have a shared understanding of what the altruistic thing is, right? And that's the nature of free markets. And so like like what we do in tradfi, or like in fiat, is there's like there's regulators, right? There's a Fed and there's taxes and there's all these like systems to kind of try to like think about what the KPIs are that define when an economy is like too hot or too cold, and think about like the levers that might be in place to try to like temper that or change that, right? And then to kind of try to sit back and think about an economy like that. So like last weekend, this kind of a lot of this came into during the weekend. I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, like like we can wait for another gauge, but we've got the wind at our back, and I'd like really like to try to figure this out. And I understand that like what Solar wants is like more going to these core pools, and he wants like he doesn't want more like extractive like kind of black hole type farming, right? So I did some thinking. Freddie actually helped with it. Like we thought about it a little bit, and I just went directly to our council and I said, hey, like let's like like let's not be greedy here, and like we want to be benevolent, we want to build ecosystems. Like Badger's always wanted to build ecosystems, right? We're partner first, but like we're in a situation now where it's really important that we show that, and that we show restraint, and that we show that like that we're willing to kind of like cede some power or not trying to take over, right? But we also need to like make sure that we're getting our fair share and whatnot. So anyway, there's this regulation, and basically the issue was, and notice that I didn't even go to 33%, right? But like 33% times 4.41 is, I don't know, like 150, 200%. Like a few days ago, it was like 400%. And it's like, like this isn't, like that's not healthy for the ecosystem, right? For this thing to scale at 400%, because remember, like the more that people put in the next voting round, there's more gravior in it, and it votes and the yields go up, right? So for this thing, for this like gravior Orabel ETH to be yielding 400%, when Orabel is yielding 50%, and when like Aura ETH is yielding like nothing, and when you go and look at like all of the other yields, and you're like, this is just, it's like, it's kind of really pretty black holy, right? And you're like, okay, are we gonna like implode the whole ecosystem with this? So thinking about it a little more, we said, okay, yeah, probably. So like, what do we do about it? And so the idea is we've got this 33 pool, right? Let's cap it. So like, let's govern or regulate the pool such that only 20% of it will go to the pool at first, right? And then the rest of it will give to Solar Curve's ecosystem pools, right? So we'll send 50% to ST ETH, which makes money, and 50% to Aave USD, which I don't think makes money yet because they need to work on the contract a little more and migrate, but should make money. And like, that should be, dollars or a core pool. And again, like I know we're a Bitcoin company, there's not a Bitcoin boosted pool yet, but like, hey, if there's an interest in like directing lots of emissions towards like boosted pools, I think that might be an interesting thing to work on. So basically what we said is, okay, you know what, for the first two rounds, because through all of our experience in like voting dynamics, right, it takes two rounds to understand, right? You do something, and then like it, everything's like 2 weeks, and then there's like everything buffers on like convex or aura for a week. So to really understand like the result of a change or an action in kind of like a voting ecosystem, like the type of thing we're talking about, right, it takes at least two rounds. So what we said is, okay, like, and this is round zero, right? Like we didn't really count this round. This isn't real voting, but the idea is next round we're going to vote for it with like, I think right now we're talking about like about 33% of Badger's vote weight, which again is gravier, but yeah, with pretty good weight, right? Which should make high yields. Right? The second round, then all these people are going to come into the pool, right? The second round, all the gravior that people deposited in the pool is going to vote for the pool, right? And like at that moment, right after the yield switch, like there should be very close to the natural yields that we were talking about there. And assuming like there aren't external people voting for it, right? That then boosts the yields, and like never, our calculations will always be based on our models, right? Not based on like what the actual yields are, right? Because then basically if somebody else votes for it, you're just giving their vote away, which isn't the intention, right? It's to regulate gravior. So the point is we do these three rounds where we're doing 2/3 and 1/3, right? And then after that, we're going to target a return that's 20% higher than the yield of the highest Orabel pool, right? Because this is an Orabel pool. So the idea is after a few rounds and things have equalized, right? Like every voting round, like, and again, we need to get the governance talks about this a little more, right? But we've got a council together, and I hope to engage like Balancer and Aura governance and get like like a group of people that are really thinking deep about this and thinking about regulation and thinking about, first of all, like what these levers are, what the methods of setting them are, right? And then like how you do that, and like what the governance is around it, and how you move fast and make good decisions while still, yeah, there's a lot to think about there, but it's super exciting. And anyway, so that's where we got to, right? So we put this proposal out, the council approved it, and then I think Solar might have been like having a nice time with his family on the 4th of July or something. But yeah, he's changed his mind. So now we got our gauge, and this is a regulation. And yeah, like let's go. I think that like that's kind of that whole story. Um, and that's the end of my thing. Questions? Need a minute to process?
Hey, Tritium, it's Freddie. Hey, I just wanted to say that for anybody who goes out to the balancer, site and tries to filter on Graviora, they're not going to find anything. They'll have to filter on one of the other paired tokens. Graviora is no longer apparently in the token list.
Or put the contract address in. I'm working with the team. I'll ping them again. So like we got him a token logo. We were a bit late to get him a token logo, and I think it's probably just not registered yet. But yeah, you've got to put in, or you can put the contract address in, right? If you paste the contract address into that search, it'll find it. Or you can search Orabel and then find it. But that's a good point. And thanks for the reminder. Anything else? I mean, the other thing I'll say is like, like I've been clearly present like in this Graviora chat in the community a lot, right? Like a lot of the thinking and the ideas like is actually coming from the discourse that we're having, right? So just to say like the people that have been engaged, thank you. It's been great. And like, yeah, like let's keep doing this, right? Like let's keep sharing information, let's keep learning together, let's keep trying to like educate the ecosystem together. And like, in my mind, like I get super excited about this stuff because like if you think about this whole story, like we went through this thing, we had a bubble, like we can learn a lot of lessons, right? We're Badger and this community and Balancer and Aura and like this whole kind of thing is like right at the epoch of like another attempt, right? That has more advanced AMM tech. There's already quite a bit of additional thought that went into it, right? You can already see that there's a lot of governance and thought going into like how do we make this more sustainable. And I just like to me, I guess like that's a super exciting journey for Badger to go on, is to kind of try to work and think about like how do we take everything we learned and like and try to really build like a sustainable DeFi economy. And yeah, I think VE is the closest thing we have to it, VE curve in a sense. And I think there's a lot that we can learn and we can do a lot better. Nobody's even looking at the chat. Can anybody type anything in the chat? Or we done? Anybody else? Somebody else talk. Freddie talks. I like Freddie. Anybody want to be like Freddie?
Yo,
Okay,
Trit.
well. Yo, ooh. Hey, what's up?
Any timeline on when bveCVX will be a on or a vault on Badger?
Soon, TM. I'm not. I would. Yeah, days, but I don't want to say how many. But hopefully in the single digits. Is that good enough? Okay. Anybody else?
I'm wondering what's your kind of read on
Perfect,
the
thanks.
vibe between the Badger and the Aura Balancer teams. Like, do you think we should be doing more stuff to get AMAs going with them, or kind of help lubricate some of these governance discussions?
I mean, I'm talking to them a lot. So like Aura is like baby DAO, right? It's a little bit like Citadel was like a month after their Discord opened. So like most of the people there are just kind of trying to figure out what's going on still. And like there was a nice community forming, but I actually think like at the moment the better like smart VE balancer community like people is in our Graviora channel, right? And that's how all DAOs are. And then balancer like and I'm talking to their team a lot, right? So, and I'm very present. Like, I think they kind of see me. I'm also like kind of the tritium of Aura right now because they need one. So, like, there's a good relationship there, and we're talking. And like, I'm just not sure that they have a whole lot of reach either, right? I think the reason that like, I showed you how like stupid the pricing is, right? Like, I mean, this is ridiculous. And like, basically, they just launched in a bear market, and there's nobody like shilling it, right? And it's only like tradable on Balancer, which like nobody knows about. And it's just like, yeah, like it's a hard time to get information out to the market, I think, more than anything else. So anyway, and then the Balancer community again, like like I'm also engaged there. Like Solar Curve and I obviously had some conversations in which I continued to send him proposal after proposal to convince him that this was good. And then like I think once this gauge spins up, first of all, like the goal is to get more gauges to spin up. So like once it spins up, like, hey, if you're a DAO, like we can do this with you too. Like it's not that hard. Like you don't even really need to talk to us. We're very happy to help. So part of it's like getting other DAOs involved as well. And then what I hope is that as people start to realize that this is a thing, that it's an okay thing, and that it kind of solves the problem that the balancer team is a little worried about right now, which is the same problem that the curve team had, which is that you do this convex layer and then you lose all control, right? And so if this is something that can be more efficient than the bribe market in a sense, right? Or that creates another way of like capturing that value, right? That has extra efficiency, then you can take at least some of that extra efficiency and redirect it to supporting what you want. And as the market gets irrational, right, this most likely will become more efficient, which means that like I need to think about it all more and it will take time to figure it out. But it seems to me like as things get more out of whack, right, you can build a system where you're then taxing for kind of or altruistically like taking more and more and venting it to supporting the ecosystem, which then kind of prevents bubbles from getting too big and means that there's something like stable behind it when they pop. So yeah, I don't know. Like I think this is like big stuff and like this is new and like yeah, we're all kind of talking. And I think like this regulation, what I see is like, like the Badger Council in the end is not the right person to be saying like, hey, let's regulate this pool to like not compete with pools like it by more than this much and like figure that out, right? Like that actually better belongs with some sort of a multi-DAO federation where probably like the people on it are appointed, so there doesn't need to be a vote, but some sort of like a multi-DAO council that can like make these decisions and kind of I guess it's like really like a like a Fed of balancer in a sense, or like a regulation authority. So over time, like I'm hoping that I can get other people into that and that can kind of be how that relationship works, right? Is that we all kind of sit at a regulatory table and then also, being close to each other, look to find other like synergies and collaborate.
What about other DAOs outside of those two? Do you have any DAOs that you're looking at that are going to need this Graviora magic to deepen liquidity on Balancer? Like any use cases for DAOs that we could partner with to help us, some additional pools
There's
that we could
tons.
use bootstrapping?
There's tons, and to me, actually, like the DAOs that this might be.
The vibe that I got from you, it seemed like there's a lot of concern about this black hole and Badger trying to accrue the value back to itself, which I think I putting myself in the other person's shoes, like I think that would, I could see how other people would think that. But if we were to come to the table with, hey, Badger will be providing this liquidity service for other projects that are launching or established DAOs that are looking to bring into Balancer, like, and that's what we've seen with other DAOs who, like,
yeah, but you have to, you have to think about, again, like really when you're thinking about like multi-DAO governance, you have to think about the stakeholders. So like what Balancer doesn't like, the issue for Balancer, I think that it's like extra offensive and it's like rubbing like salt into a wound, right? But the issue isn't that the yields on cream are 200%, right? The issue is that like 30% of the BAL emissions or whatever are going to a pool that doesn't trade and doesn't take any fees, right? So from Balancer's point of view, like, and then the problem is that like most people go to Uniswap to trade, right? Like Balancer is not generally the platform that people are making primary trades over. It's mostly like something that ARBs are using to like ARB out other markets, right? And I think like CowSwap is moving forward, but that will take time. So the reality is for Balancer, right? The way they make their money is by having like WST ETH in that pool, or by having like this Aave USD in this pool, right? Like there are very specific things that they have that if it's included in a pool, just that presence makes money for them, a bit like Graviora does for us. And so like when you think about how you make Balancer happy, going to them and saying like, hey, we're going to find like lots of DAOs that don't trade that much, right? We're going to spread everything across that. Like that doesn't, that's not as exciting. If you say, hey, we found a bunch of like little DAOs that trade a lot, right? And they're gonna like move their primary liquidity to Balancer and like aren't on a bunch of sexes, and like by default, by the fact that they're here, you're gonna get all this volume. Like that's cool. But a lot of like making Balancer happy comes with this, this factory too, and the ability to include this like earning WST ETH, for example, or earning Aave USD in anything. And then what's interesting is like Lido, right? So like what I can see is this comes out like partnering with Lido and a bunch of other DAOs to say like, hey, like pair, like Gravity or WST ETH and pair something with it, right? And then maybe like Lido's voting for him a little bit, right? And you're going to get a little support from Badger and a little support from Lido to make it happen. You create more utility for STETH, which like helps people like do something with it, and maybe like gets a little bit closer to peg. So like there's a lot of cool stuff to happen, but like from the balancer stakeholder point of view, it's about getting this pool up, right? So
Hey,
that's one stakeholder.
Jordan, is it fair to say that Balancer's primary goal is to make sure that yields are directed to the pools that make them money, right? Where they want the most liquidity. I mean,
Well,
I think
yeah,
that's kind of what you're describing, right?
they are trying to, like, and again, like, I mean, I'm sure they would love it to be perfectly aligned. We would love it. I mean, we have the same problem, right? Like, this is the great DAO problem is like, how do you have governance where it matters? Like, because like the value of the eBAL is deciding where the BAL goes, right? So if you just allocate it all to the fees, then you destroy that value. But you also want to like make money, right? So how do you strike that balance? And again, that's, Curve did it in a technocratic way, and then this convex layer like opened it up to a free market. And I do think that's the big challenge, right? Isn't that's what they want? But and I think they realize, maybe some more than others, that it's not an absolute, right? It's about finding the balance. It's about a healthy, sustainable ecosystem that has that excess, like, not everything needs to be totally rational and fee-based. There's room for innovation. There's room for new DAOs to come in and try to launch and grow and use this as a tool, right? But it's not just like, like creating the bubble for the guy that has the most money and wants a Ponzi. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, and so then, like, I guess the other thing is like one of the interesting things is I talked to Creator DAO a little bit about trying to do some marketing around this, but it's like so deep, and like it was, like it was a call, and it's like, man, I don't even know how to like get aligned here because it's like such a different context. But then I noticed that they've got a balancer pool. I think I might go to Creator and be like, hey guys, how about this? Right, like we'll figure out how to like get you more liquidity and jack up your yields and like make your token kick ass, and then you tell the story about it. So like that's an interesting one. And I don't know, like once we get these Biora about, like once the base flywheel's there, right? Like there's a little more to go, and then like I take a weekend off and like go party and chill a little bit, right? Like then I do think kind of the next step is looking for DAOs. Like, and then I mean the other side, like on the less influence side for Badger, right? There's two things. So there's me thinking about Gravity, like what do we want to do? We want to find DAOs to use this and help them explore the different applications. And then, so I can talk about Creator, or I can talk about like there's a few Lido, although I think we need these factories first, right? I've got some ideas there. But the other DAO we can help is Badger, right? And we're already doing that with the Badger Bitcoin. And then I know there's a lot of interest for Bitcoin yields, like maybe there's something with a Bitcoin Gravity or a 90-10, or like, so I think, like to a certain extent, like I'm trying to stay more focused on Gravity as a general tool for everyone. But I'm also starting to come up with some ideas for like vaults for Badger, and also ideas for like vaults for other DAOs that like Badger could take fee sharing on, right? That they could use. So yeah, no, there's a lot of thinking there, and I could do like another 2 office hours on that probably, but it makes more sense for me to get a little further first, I think, and have more certainty. I think we're an hour. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. If there are no other questions or comments, we can end it here. And if you missed part of this, we'll have the video up shortly on our YouTube.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for coming. Like, let me know if you got this, right? Like, that's one of the questions. Like, just dump in the gravure. Like, that's, you know, I wonder when I talk at this level for this long, if it's like soaking in, or if like I'm losing people. So yeah, like if you please like just DM me if you've got any feedback. I'd love to hear it. And yeah, thanks for coming.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Talk to you next week.